Hello, hello, hello! Welcome to Geek Factor TV. My name is Kaczmar. Today we'll be taking a look at a game called Starscrapers Cave In. This is a game that is going to be published by Hexy, which is a Polish publishing company. The game was designed by Filip Miłuński and Jan Zalewski. This is going to be on Kickstarter really soon. I don't know the exact date. It's supposed to be like the second half of July. Now, once the campaign launches, I will put the link to the Kickstarter campaign in the description below. If you're watching it before, then obviously the link is not there. Now, in this game, you are going to play miners. Now, I know what you're thinking. Miners? That doesn't really sound very exciting. Not exciting at all. Wait a minute. Space miners. Much better, right? You are going to be traveling through space. You are going to hire mercenaries. You are going to be ruthless. You're going to be vigilant. You're going to be the very best at mining precious hexes crystals. Now, those hexes crystals and some other things that you're going to be able to do in this game are going to get you victory points. So obviously when I say be the very best, I mean get the most victory points by the end of the game. So I also want to say that I'm also doing a review for this game, what I think about this game. The link to that review, also in English, will also be in the description below. Now, for now, let's stick to the video tutorial, how to play. We're going to begin traditionally with the setup. The first thing you do is you set up the board in the middle of the gaming area and you put this cave-in marker on the 0 spot on this track. You then take the crystal tokens, you separate them into 4 stacks based on those values right here, so you have the 1s, the 3s, the 6s and the 10s, and then you take each stack and you shuffle it. And then you put those stacks face down below the game board. The last thing you do with the crystal tokens is you reveal a certain amount of tokens from each type. You reveal 4 value 1 tokens, 3 value 3 tokens, 2 value 6 tokens and 1 value 10 token. You reveal them like so, that's how you place them, that's how this is gonna look afterwards, and from now on this area is gonna be known as the mine. Now from the 4 command cards, I also shuffle them and then each player draws a single command card. Now, for example, let's say that we have a 2-player game and we drew a blue and a yellow command card. The other 2 command cards are returned to the box, but not their respective decks. I'm talking about the colors at this point. Now what I do with the remaining mercenary decks is I separate them using the value found in the top left corner. There are 4 values, 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now I separate each deck according to those values and then I shuffle all 1s, all 2s, all 3s and all 4s together respectively. So I take all the 1s into a single deck, I do the same with the 2s, I do the same with the 3s and obviously with the 4s. Now I shuffle each of those decks individually, mixing the colors together. Make sure you shuffle them really well. You then take those decks and you do a similar thing to the one you did with the crystal tokens. And what I mean by that is you take and you put those decks like so, and then you reveal a certain amount of cards. So with the number 1 cards, you reveal 4 of them at the bottom, like above the board. Like this is above the board, but this is like, let's say this is the bottom. So you reveal 4 1s, 3 2s, 2 3s and a single 4. This area is gonna be called the mercenary docks. Those are the so-called artifact cards. Now you take those, you divide them into 3 equal stacks and then you put each stack face up on a single space on the board. So we have 3 spaces for 3 stacks. Finally, each player places the chosen command card in front of them. This is the beginning of their gaming area. This is what the gaming area will look like for them at the beginning of the game. And then each player takes a corresponding totem Obviously, I'm talking about the color. And now you have to choose the first player. Now, according to the rulebook, the first player is the one who most recently saw a movie where Steven Seagal played a supporting role. But unless it so happens that you have some self-respect and you haven't seen a Steven Seagal movie since the late 1990s, you're probably gonna have to find a different way. Unless, wait, Machete from Robert Rodriguez, he played a supporting part there. So the one of you who saw Machete most recently, that's the starting player. Other than that, pick a different way, pick a starting player. So that was the setup. We're gonna move on to the gameplay, but before we do that, I want to talk to you a bit about your personal gaming area, because that will allow me to explain some key concepts to you that I want you to keep in mind when you're listening, when you're watching the rest of the video and listening to the other rules. So let's go to your personal gaming area for now. So this is what I want you to understand. This is your gaming area. As you can see, this is the very beginning of the game, so you have nothing apart from your command card. But then, during the course of the game, your gaming area will expand. New things will appear, and this is what I want to get into right now. Because at a certain point during the game, you will have something which is called the base. You're gonna put it somewhere to the right of your command card. Now, the way that works is even more than 90% of the game revolves around playing cards onto a table. Whenever you perform an action, you're gonna see about the actions in just a second. You play a card and you put it on the table. Now, what is important is the order in which you play the cards, because after each time you play the card, you place it on top of a previously played card. Then, at the end of your turn, you place all those cards you just played into your base. So the base will be mercenary cards that you've placed them before. So obviously at the beginning you don't have a base. Then after your first turn you will have a base. And then during your next turn you will also play cards. And at first you're gonna play them, let's say, to the right of your gaming area, like so. And then at the end of your turn you will put those cards into your base on top of them, like so. So this is really important. I really wanted you to understand that thing first and foremost. As you can see, when you form a base, only the top of the cards can be seen, and that has to be clearly seen by all of the players and at the table. Now, one more key concept I want to introduce here is the leader, because there will always be a single card on top of this stack, on top of your base, and this is the only card that is going to be fully visible. And for the purposes of certain actions during the game or certain phases, you will see about it in a second, trust me, that card will be known as the leader. Other things will also appear in your gaming area, for example, artifacts, which you will be placing underneath your card, your command card, like so. So make sure you have enough space for some artifacts and for your base and for a place where you'll be playing your cards. Right, so now we can get to the proper gameplay. Now, the way the game works is it is divided into turns. Now, each player plays through the entire turn. Now, a player's turn is divided into 3 phases: a starting phase, an action phase, and the cleanup phase. Now, the way it works is when it's my turn, I play through all 3 phases. Then it's the next player's turn, and he or she plays through all 3 phases, and so on and so forth until the game ends. So let's start and let's discuss the starting phase, which most definitely you will omit during the very first turn of your game. So during this phase you check and see if your leader has an ability that you can make use of right now. Obviously, if this is the beginning of the game, you don't have a base, so you don't have a leader. So you skip that phase during your very first turn. But on your future turns, you will most likely have a base, so you will have a leader, and then you check that leader's card. And you see if that ability can be triggered at this point. If it is an action, you can perform that action. If it is an ability, then that ability triggers right now, and that ability will be valid throughout your turn. And now the second phase is the meat of this game. This is the action phase. Now, in the action phase, you perform 2 actions. Now what is important to remember here is that those two actions have to be different. Those have to be two different actions. You cannot perform the same action twice. Now how does that relate to the starting phase, the one I just told you about, where I said that you can also activate your leader's ability and perform that leader's action? Well, the way that works is that is considered an extra action. So if you have a base, if you have a leader in your gaming area, and you choose to activate that leader during your starting phase, and then you move on to your second phase, the action phase, you still get two actions. And that is the only way really you can perform a single action twice. So for example, if I had a leader that allowed me to mine a crystal, in my second phase, the action phase, I can still perform and mine the crystal action. That's the way it works. So you have the starting phase, the one I just told you about, but now it's the second phase. We treat those separately, right? And you get two actions. Now you get 4 to choose from, and those are mining a crystal, like I just said, hiring a mercenary, collecting an artifact, and then playing a mercenary's ability. Let's take a closer look at those actions. So the first action we're going to talk about is recruiting a mercenary. What you do is you take a look at the mercenary dock and you see which mercenary you want to recruit. What you do then is you play a card from your hand. The color of the card is of no importance here, but what matters is the value. See, whenever I want to recruit a mercenary, I have to play a card with the value 1 smaller than the value of the mercenary I want to recruit. So for example, if I want to recruit a mercenary with the value 2, I have to play a card from my hand with the value 1. Which means, as you can probably guess by that point, that those one valued mercenaries right here at the bottom row, those are free. You can simply take them, and whenever you recruit a mercenary, whether it is a 1 value, a 2 value, a 3 or a 4, you add it to your hand immediately. So for example, I take the number 2 card and I recruit a 3 valued mercenary. Like I said a minute ago, the card that I played, I put it to the right of my command card. Remember also that at no point during the game can you have more than 7 mercenaries in your hand, which means that if you do have 7 mercenaries in your hand, you cannot perform the recruit a mercenary action. Now the next possible action is to mine crystals. Now what you do is it's very similar to recruiting a mercenary, but this time the cards that you play have to match the color of the crystal you are collecting. And the value of the cards that I play has to be equal or higher than the value of the crystal I want to mine. So for example, if I want to mine this value free crystal, I have to play cards from my hand with that exact value or higher, and with that exact color. Which means that I have, you see, this is the brown crystal, which means I play 2 cards, a 2 and a 1, that adds up to 3. I play those 2 cards, and then I collect that token and I keep it face down in my gaming area. One important thing here is whenever you mine a crystal with that symbol on it, that is a so-called cave-in symbol, whenever you mine that crystal, you move the cave-in marker on the cave-in track 1 spot to the right. Now remember those 2 command cards that you set aside at the beginning of the game during the setup? Well, you're probably wondering, well, if I threw out those 2 decks, how am I going to pay for the crystals that I want to mine of that color? As you can see, I have green crystals, I have red crystals. What am I supposed to do with those if the red and the green decks are out of the game? Well, this is why you keep those cards nearby, because this is a reminder that you can mine crystals of those 2 colors using any color in your hand, but it has to be the same color. So for example, if I wanted to mine that value 3 green crystal, I could play 2 of those cards, because as you can see I have the 2 and the 1, that adds up to 3, and they are of a single color. I can play those and get that green crystal. I could not do that if this is what I have in my hand. As you can see, those also add up to a 3, but they are 2 of a different color, so I can't use those. So the cards that you play don't have to match that color, the color of the two command cards that you drew during the setup of the game, but they have to match each other's color. If you take a closer look, you will see that some of the crystals have so-called faction symbols on them. Those will come into play during final scoring. Third action we're going to talk about is collecting an artifact. Now the way you do that is you take a look at the value shown here, right here on the card, and you pay that value using your mercenary cards. Now the color of the mercenary cards that you play is unimportant. Those values simply have to add up to the value you have here. So I can play this purple and this yellow card because they add up to a 5, which is the exact same value as this right here, which means I can play those cards and then I get to take that artifact. Bear in mind that whenever you draw an artifact from a deck, and this is the last card of that artifact deck, that deck is depleted, you always move the cave-in marker by 1 spot. Now once you've collected the artifact, you add it to your command card, you add it to your gaming area. Now as you can see, each artifact is divided into 2 areas. You pick which area you want to use as your ability, and then you add it to your command card by sliding it underneath, showing the chosen half so that you can see it. Keep in mind that your area will expand and you'll probably be adding more artifacts as the game goes on, so this is probably going to grow. Now the final action you can take is using your Mercenaries ability. Now the way you do that is you simply play the card from your hand and you use the ability written on the mercenary card. For example, this one says, take 1 purple crystal if it is available in the mine. If you can't see it, if it is not revealed from the crystal decks, then you obviously can't take it. Now this is important because technically it works the same way. You're playing cards from your hand, but when you were playing the cards from your hand to perform the recruit a mercenary action, or mine the crystal action, or collect an artifact action, you were not activating those abilities. You can only activate those abilities by performing this particular action, which is using a mercenary's ability. So those are the 4 actions, but a very important thing to remember here is that you don't have to perform those 2 actions. You can choose to do something else instead, and that thing is taking over a base. Now you can take over an enemy's base, your opponent's base, obviously, but you can also take over your own base. You'll see why you would want to do that in a second. This is basically a very cool way to get back some cards back into your hand. So let's see how that taking over a base looks like. So how does taking over a base works? Well, first of all, you have to decide if you want to take over your own base, which is possible, or take over an opponent's base. Now there is no fight, there is no way to counteract it, so this is simply a decision made by the active player, the player who decided to not perform any actions but to take over a base. So let's say that the blue player is taking over the yellow player's base. He takes a look at those cards and he says, yeah, I want to take that over. Now what happens is, first, the yellow player, he is attacked, so to speak, he gets to take his leader's card and put it and add it to his or her hand. And then the blue player, which is the one taking over, takes the remaining cards, the cards remaining in the base, and then he adds them to his or her hand. Now he takes them in the amount that would either fill up his hand, remember the hand limit is 7 cards, or he takes all of the mercenary cards from his opponent's base if there aren't enough cards to fill up his hand, like in this example, right? I have 3 cards on my hand, so technically I could take 4 cards from my opponent, but he only has, or she only has the 3, so I'm taking those 3 and I'm adding them to my hand. So as you can see, the attacked player, so to speak, the one whose base is being taken over, always gets to keep his or her leader. More so, what is happening is you take a look at the leader's card, which was just returned to the owner's hand, and you take a look at the color. Then the player who is taking over the base, the active player, gets to take the totem exactly of this color. So, well, this player already has the blue totem, and in which case he would not take it, obviously. But for example, if that particular totem was in the possession of another player, or if it was in general supply, he would be able to collect that totem. Now when you're taking over your own base, it works in the exact same way, only you get to keep the leader, you get to take it as well and add it to your hand. So this is a cool way to either get back some of the cards you played and add it to your base, or if you see that your opponent has a much better, much stronger base, then that's the way you take those cards from them. Remember about the hand limit of those 7 cards. Remember that you are taking over the base instead of performing the 2 actions from second phase. You can still perform the first phase, which is activating a leader's ability. You can still do that. On top of that, you can choose whether you want to do that before or after taking over a base. And that's it. So that was the second phase, which is the action phase, where you choose if you want to perform 2 actions or if you want to take over a base. Once you've done the second phase, you perform some actions or you've taken over a base, you move on to the third phase, which is the cleanup phase. What do you do here? So the first thing you do during cleanup is you take the cards that you played during this turn and you add them to your base by placing them on top. So now you've covered up a previous leader and now you have a new leader in your base. Now your base, just like your hand, has a limit. The limit is also 7 cards. So if you were to add more cards to your base and then the amount of cards in your base would exceed that limit, you would have to reduce down to 7. And you would reduce from the very bottom or from the top, whichever way you choose to look at it. So for example, right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cards. The limit is 7, which means I have to remove 2 cards from the bottom. Those 2 cards are removed from the game. Also at this point, if you mined any crystals on those during this turn, you draw new crystal tokens and you add them to the mine. You do the exact same thing with the docks, which is you draw new cards to make sure the docks look exactly the same way they did when you started your turn. Here, however, situation is slightly different because whenever you have to reveal new cards and by doing so you deplete a deck, then the cave-in marker is moved by a single spot. And that's basically it. Each player plays through their turn and then they do so until the game ends. Exactly, let's see when the game ends and how do you do the final scoring. The game ends when the cave-in marker reaches the number 7 spot in a 2-player game, number 8 spot in a 3-player game, or the number 9 spot in a 4-player game. Now you round up the score. The first thing you count are obviously the victory points you get from the crystals that you mined. You don't take a look at the value of the crystal, the one that you used, the one that you looked at when mining the crystal. You take a look at the VP value, as you can see right here in this white field. You then take a look at the artifacts and see if any of them give you some extra victory points. Then you take a look at the totems, and the funny thing here with the totems is that the creators of the game haven't exactly reached a conclusion on how to score the totems. For now, to keep it safe, to not mess up the score, the end game scoring, you simply get 3 points from each totem you managed to collect during the game. But that rule will probably change, so check in the rulebook if you want to see how many points you get for each totem. And the final thing that gives you points are those faction symbols. Those faction symbols, but only on the crystal tokens that you've collected. Now what you look at here are sets of different faction symbols. So as you can see, I have 2 of each of those symbols, but I divide them to make sure I have a set of different faction symbols. Then there is a table in the rulebook which looks something like here, and as you can see, it says in Polish, but I'll translate it to you. It says the number of different faction symbols. So for example, if I have 4 symbols here and 2 symbols here, that means that for 4 symbols I get 10 points, for 2 different symbols I get 3 points, which means altogether for those 2 sets I get 13 points. The end, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for watching. It is worth mentioning that once the end game triggers by moving the cave-in marker onto an appropriate spot, The way you do that is you make sure that each player had the exact same number of turns. So you finish the round, so to speak, the circle, right? So the last player to perform their full turn will always be the player to the right of the starting player. Keep that in mind when you're finishing the game. So after you've done the scoring, the player with the most victory points wins the game. Now I hope this video helps you somehow and gave you some food for thought whether Star Scrapers Cave-In is a game you might be interested in. If you are, follow the link to the Kickstarter campaign you can find in the description below. If the link is not there, it means the campaign hasn't started yet. I will put the link there as soon as the campaign launches. And now, if you have any questions regarding anything you saw during the video, please do not hesitate to let me know. If you know about the game and you know I've made some mistakes, maybe I'm only human, sorry. Also put those in the comment section below. I will address those also as soon as I get a chance. I will also ask the publishers, the authors maybe, to take a closer look and to pay attention to the comment section, so maybe they will notice a question before I do and will be able to answer it. And that's pretty much it. Thank you, Hexy Studio, for allowing me to review and explain this game to my viewers. And that was it. That was the video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I get to see you soon here on Geek Factor TV. Do not forget to comment, like, subscribe, and see you at during the next episode. Thank you and bye-bye.